Choir, I'm going to give you another round of applause. Wow. Last week, I had the extreme privilege of sharing to you my belief that miracles continue to happen today. They're not just stuff that happened over 2,000 years ago and things that were just written down for us to read, but God actually invades our lives today. And when God invades our lives, He brings us this thing that's called miracles. Several years ago, I had the privilege of taking some teenagers to a camp in Wise County called Camp Bethel. And it took us about 4.5 hours to get to this camp, and I wasn't quite sure what we were going to experience once we got there. But we drove into this beautiful, I can't even tell you how nice the campground was. And there were cabins built everywhere for us to sleep in, and just trees and open areas to play in. It was just a beautiful place. And we were really excited about going to this camp. And when we got there and we got unpacked, we had a worship service. And the following morning, when we woke up, we went to the cafeteria building and we got to meet the fellow that ran the camp. And when we met him, he told us about some activities that we were going to be able to experience at the camp. And we got to choose 3 that we could experience over the weekend. And the 3 that I chose, one was hiking because the area was just stunning. The other one was a high ropes course. And I figured I would be able to do this since I had taken some ropes classes in the fire department. And then the other one was an activity called spelunking. And I couldn't even spell spelunking, so I figured I would try it out just to see what it was like. And for those of you that don't know what spelunking is, it's when you take a really fat guy like me and you put him in a really small cave and you just kind of let him explore. And it was quite fun. I'll tell you about that experience maybe sometime. But the thing that was so neat about each of these events is when I was on the high ropes course, I could look out and I could see a beautiful valley. When I went walking through the wilderness, I could see all of the trees and different animals and things that God created. And then when I got into the cave, I could see just amazing architecture that God did for us. And it was just a neat little playground to be so far underneath the surface of the earth and to be able to experience something as beautiful as a cave underground. When I think about that experience, I think about how God continues to work those miracles in our lives today, and He continues to allow us to experience those miracles. But even though we experience miracles today, I do want us to take a look into the Scriptures, and I want us to talk about an experience that did happen 2,000 years ago. And I want us to really get into this miracle and see how it applies to us. And I want us to be able to answer the question, what does this miracle say to us today? What does this miracle teach us today? And as we study these miracles, or we study these miracles because they reveal to us what is possible today through the impossible. And what we're going to do is we have a PowerPoint. Go on through the next couple of slides, Ethan. And if you're taking notes, these notes will be on the PowerPoint as well as in your bulletin so you can follow along. But we study miracles today because they reveal what is possible today through the impossible. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Jesus walking on the water because that's an impossible thing. I was watching the Discovery Channel one day and I saw something about a lizard that lived in South Africa. And the name of the lizard is what caught me. They called this lizard the Jesus lizard. Apparently, this lizard is so light and its feet are so heavily webbed that when he runs, he can actually run on top of the water. And he runs so fast across this water so he can catch bugs. What I had to do is I had to when I remembered this lizard, I went on YouTube. And I don't know if anybody in here is computer savvy and they like watching YouTube, but if you do, type in Jesus lizard and watch this little thing as he runs across the top of the water. It's amazing. Now, there was a guy that was on the Discovery Channel that said because this lizard can walk across the water, that man must be able to do the same thing. And I remember watching that, and I got to thinking, and I was shaking my head as I was watching TV, and that didn't make any sense to me. You know, because a very tiny lizard could walk on water, why would a human be able to? A human can't walk on water. And the reason I can say that to you today is I've tried it before. You know what it's called? It's called swimming, and it doesn't work. My wife can't walk on water. Nobody can. It's impossible. So the reality is that this impossible event that we're going to talk about today speaks to our lives about what's possible with God. As we look at our Bibles, it says Jesus was hanging out with his disciples. They got onto a boat and they went ahead of him. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. So Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," Jesus said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. And when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and he began to sink, and he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Immediately Jesus reached out his hand, and he caught Peter. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." I think this miracle teaches us some things in our lives today. Number one is recognizing the reality of God can be scary. Recognizing the reality of God can be scary. You have to imagine this scene. The disciples were heading out into this lake, and the wind and the waves started to rise. And the next thing you know, it was somewhere around 3 to 4 a.m. And they look across the water, and they see this figure walking towards them. They get scared. "Oh my gosh, somebody's walking on the water. It's impossible. Nobody can walk on the water. It's got to be a ghost." They flipped out. They were scared. Whenever the supernatural invades our lives today, when he invades the physical world, the material world that we live in, it can be scary. It means there's more to life than we actually think. Several times in God's Word, we see angels coming down and giving messages to humans. And every single time an angel makes an appearance and the angel talks to the human, the first words out of their mouth are, "Don't be afraid." Why is that? If I'm a human and I'm in my kitchen and I'm doing the dishes and I turn around and there's an angel standing there, all of a sudden my reality is shattered because there's this huge thing, well-muscled like me, just dripping. That's a joke. Okay? Just dripping with the glory of God. The first response of humanity is to be extremely scared. We scream. We get frightened. And the angel says, "Don't be afraid," because you don't have to be afraid. Even though recognizing the reality of God can be scary. I know this because I spent many years of my life trying to run from that reality. I didn't want to know that God is truth. I didn't want to know that He was real because I knew that if I did, it would mean something different in my life. That my worldview would have to expand and it would have to include God. It would have to include His plan in my life, and that would be scary. Maybe that's where you are. Maybe you're right here. You're scared of recognizing the reality of God. Maybe you've been running from His reality, and you don't want to recognize that God really does love you, and that He really does have a plan for your life, and it's a good plan. Philippians says, "Every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord." Someday, this will happen. All of us in here will have to recognize the reality of God. And we're going to have to drop to our knees. And for some people, that's going to be a very scary time. But you know, it doesn't have to be. Jesus' answer for you and for me today is don't be afraid. The message I want to give you is a message of love. I love you, Jesus says. I have a plan for your life. And that's incredible. There's nothing bad that I want for you. That's the reality. If you're just a seeker and you're here today just to check things out, I want to applaud you for being here.